Hey, what's up, comrades? It's October! Hooray! So I decided, I finished Shining games. I actually did two back-to-back there at the end, Shining Resonance Refrain and Shining Arc, because I wanted to just do like horror games in October because I'm a nerd. And so that's what I'm doing, kind of. I didn't like... I just chose like kind of like randomly in my like pile of like horror games. Or games in my horror folders on my server that I've collected over the years or downloaded, right? Games that are identified as horror. And so I chose like 4 of those games. One of them is like Fitgirl, like highly recommends Midnight Walk, which is the first one I'm going to play. And I, having played through the whole thing, calling it a horror game is not accurate at all. So it does have some like horror-based elements in that it's like a walking simulator style game. I would just say it's like an adventure game like Myst, but it has like the amnesia kind of like horror aspect where there are sometimes monsters and sometimes you gotta hide in like cabinets or in burrows in the ground to get away from them, but it's very far and removed, and they're nearly not that much of a threat as like an annoyance or something it's an extra thing you just gotta keep an eye on, right? And the game is kind of like, it's almost like it's a claymation game, which is fantastic because they actually did like claymation and filmed it and then put it in the video game and stuff, and it's pretty good. The game is a recommend. You know, like if you don't want to listen to me, if you just want to sit here for the first couple of minutes, I agree with like everybody else I've ever seen that Midnight Walk is an excellent game. If you like that kind of like first person adventure style game, kind of like a Myst, where there's like some puzzles you got to kind of figure out, and then you kind of wander around, you get a lot of atmospheric story, but also just kind of like straightforward story, and it's just pretty good. It's like a very fun, enjoyable like story. The music's good. Like if you're into like the adventure, and again, it's almost like it's bordering like a walking simulator, but I feel like there's enough interactions and enough stuff you do that it's more of like an adventure game, like a Myst style first-person adventure game. And I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it thoroughly. So highly recommended. But yeah, so they use like claymation. So it's got that kind of like Nightmare Before Christmas style to it, but again, it's like calling it a horror game. I'm like, no. I mean, at no point was I ever scared or nervous or tense. It's just it's almost like a cozy game. It's like, it really is just like a first-person adventure game. So, but here we are. I already did it, and I'm not gonna choose something else. And then we got a few other games which may or may not be horror games as well. I guess we'll find out as we go. But other games I've been kind of wanting to play that slightly fit into this category, and then one game I just kind of randomly chose. And then there's like a trilogy of games essentially that are more puzzle-based horror. We'll see. I didn't do too much research into this. I just like grabbed some stuff and I was like, oh, that looks fun. Oh, that's interesting. Oh, I want to do that. Okay. So to get to the Midnight Walk, so it starts after the end of the world. So we as the main character, who are the burned one, we wake up in some sort of tomb, and we're like trying to break out of this thing. Like it's pretty hectic there for a second, and then we pass through this long tunnel, and our vision is like super blurry. And right when we get to the end of the tunnel, there's some creature there, and the creature pops out its eyes and gives it to us. And we're like, awesome. And then it nopes out of there. So now we can see. Now we don't have blurry vision because we got eyes from it. So again, it's like you kind of get that like grotesque style horror, but it's almost like Nightmare Before Christmas, where it's not really horror. It's more just kind of like, I don't know what to call it. Anyway, so we move forward, and then another creature gives us its ears before it nopes out. We find a locked door, and then we learn kind of like the game does the tutorials like very well. It doesn't just like, here's a tutorial, here's how you do it. The game's like, oh, if you close your eyes, your ears become super sensitive and you can find things, so, like secret things. And so there's a button to just like close your eyes, and then occasionally there'll be like noises, and you can like, you got to have like headphones or like very good sound system, because then you can like, you know, turn in the game to face where the music's at, so it keys in. And there's a bunch of like cabinets around us, and so if you close your eyes in the game, you can like pinpoint the noise to where a key is at, and it's in one of the drawers. You can also just open all the drawers if you really want. So, you know, whatever. So then with the key, we're able to get through the door, and then we find a matchbook, and these matchbooks occur all over, and they're like kind of one of the main concepts in the game is like matches and fire and stuff. And obviously we're the burnt one. So we can take a match out, we can light it, and then there's like a little fire, like a fire pit there. So we light it, and then all the Desians, like all the other kind of like creatures around here, they like wake up once we light the fire. And they don't do too much. Sometimes we can talk to people and they give us like random bullshit Sorry, or they give us some random bullshit conversations, or they talk about the story or whatever. But these guys, it's like whatever. So then we just kind of head forward, and then we get like the title of like the first level essentially, which is Tale of the Burnt One. So at this point, we learn about lighting candles and how sometimes the candles are going to have certain symbols, and if you light all the symbols, that's how we're going to get through a door and stuff. And then we also learned that the story game is going to be told a little bit by kind of the area we're in, but also there's narration, and then we're going to get people to talk to us. And so it's like very kind of atmospheric storytelling, but a lot of it is also narration, I gotta say, which the narration is very good and it's very interesting. Yeah, but also like kind of objects we find throughout the land. And one of those objects is like these radios. So we find these radios, and the radios kind of tell us, like there'll be like people conversating, which will kind of relate to the individual stories in each of the levels, or like what's going on overall. So the first one we find, it talks about a light that burned it all away. And it's like, what were they thinking? And then we move forward and we find some monsters. And these monsters are like four-legged. I can't remember what they're called off the top of my head. But they'll run after us. And if they get us, we have to go back to like a tomb. Because there's like these crypts, tomb things that are periodic. So you can almost expect that there'll be monsters whenever you see one of these things. They also autosave, so that's nice. And so the way we get past it, there's ways we gotta like sneak past it if it's not paying attention. Sometimes we just gotta run past them. Eventually, we find this pot boy, and we bring it to life, but it doesn't want to like play ball with us. So we gotta chase it around a little bit, and then we get. Oh, and the other thing is sometimes we just find like these like scraps of paper kind of floating in the air, and we pick them up, and they give us hints to how to solve puzzles and whatnot, or they give us some like more information. And so we learn that the pot boy loves coal, and so we can feed it coal periodically throughout the game. I don't know. I don't think it does anything. There's 2 endings to this game. But the ending is really just like you get to the end of the game and then you choose. And it's not like the pot boy's fire ever goes out. So, yeah, sometimes there's just coal and it's like, here, pot boy, have some coal, I guess. Anyway, so we bring him to life, then we chase him around, we feed him some coal. That helps us be friends. And he's super helpful to help us get past darkness areas, right? So we don't always have matches, and then we do, sometimes we can't reach areas. And then we hear the narrator talking about friendship and how like a small warmth in the darkness can really help and all that stuff. We find another radio thing. It talks about the creation of the world for the little ones, and that they made the Midnight Walk, which is, hey, the name of the game. And that they made the creator made the Midnight Walk for the little ones to wander around. We go solve some puzzles, and there's another radio talks about the Watchers and how the Watchers, that's what these bad guys are called, how they eat fire, but also they'll eat us, so no. Eventually we get to a bridge and we get attacked by a black cat cloud, which has like a creepy eye in it. We get knocked down off the bridge, and then we have to like relight Pot Boy again using matches. We then get told that we are currently on the Midnight Walk, right? And we meet this two-headed. So at that point, we're on the Midnight Walk. So up to that point, it was like Tale of the Burnt One. It's like the tutorial level. So then once we get knocked off the bridge, it's like, oh hey, you're on the Midnight Walk, and we meet this two-headed puppet called the Soothsayer, and he shows up all the time and gives us like cryptic bullshit to find out about. He talks about how the Pot Boy we need to carry the torch, which is the Pot Boy, to the top of the mountain, the Moon Mountain, and all this stuff, and how our purpose is burnt in clay, and that the Pot Boy must spread the fire. And then he like fades away, and he does that every time. So we proceed forward, we find a house. It's Housey, and Housey is our traveling house. So we go inside, we light the fire inside, and this is where we can like check our collectibles, and then where we can like watch videos or listen to music or look at like the puppets we can find and stuff. And we can collect this story about a woman and her rocks and how she like got rid of the sun and stuff if you really want, but you got to collect all like the stuff to like open it up. And then the house starts walking around with us. So, yay, Housey. It's like Baba Yaga's house. Awesome. And Housey just kind of follows us along the Midnight Walk. And when we go off the Midnight Walk, it kind of just hangs out and waits for us to come back and get him. Pretty good. So after we check out Housey and we leave, and sometimes we get in Housey and Housey like walks us around past some stuff, but it's all story based. It's not like we're controlling this at all. It's just like sometimes games like get inside Housey and you're like okay, and then you can like hear and sense like the Housey moving around. The next radio broadcast we pick up along the Midnight Walk talks about some creeping thing feeling us. Like the darkness can feel you and all this stuff. And then we have to sneak past some more monsters. The next radio we find is some guy talking about, sorry, that was really close to my mouth, something they found in the woods, something they couldn't name, and that how the shell phones were created to talk to it. talking about the darkness. But anyway, but whatever it is only sends out melodies, echoes of the past. So we rush past more monsters and then release a bridge which allows our housey to come follow us. We then finally wake up this hat fella. And we run into this hat fella a lot. I can't remember what his name is, but he loves talking about the midnight walk, and he's got like folksy charm and like a banjo or something. He's the one who officially calls us the burnt one, which is the first time I was like, oh, that's us they're talking about. And he tells us that we need to keep the fire burning. We get warned that the dark is full of ideas, but always wants more. Meeting back up with Housey after talking to Hat Boy, we find another radio, and this one tells us to light up the dark. And then we do a little puzzle section, which leads us to the Legend of Molgrim, which is level number 2. And a little, let's see. Oh, there are these little guys in holes. At first I thought they were like little people or little creatures, but they're just heads. So all these heads, and they don't like that we're walking around on 2 feet. The fuck's wrong with you, 2-feeter, and shit like that. And then we find a big head boy, which is a puzzle. And then once we solve that, we get permission to continue onward to meet with the chief. Or I think they call him the headmaster. Get it? And there in the middle, we light a fire, and we get told that the fire has not been set since before the bodies were banished. And then the Molgrim comes and heads over to the headmaster and the fire, and she eats the head and takes the fire, and that leaves the new headmaster. The new headmaster tells us that they want us to get rid of the Molgrim, and that we will not be allowed to leave Nobodyville. Get it? until the Molgrim, until she's gone. She then gives us the matchlock, the puns in this fucking game, which is a gun that can hold up to 3 matches, and we can like lob the lit matches to places we want to be, which is the fun new puzzle element, to be completely honest. We find a radio nearby, a guillotine that's in a room. It just says that mind over body a bunch, mind over body, mind, like that, like a bunch of people like, what's that thing that monks do? Whatever that is, right? They're chanting it. Also nearby, we meet our first flying machine. So in the flying machine, we can order our potbelly friend to hop on in there, and then we grab onto it, and it lifts us away. And this one takes us to this mushroom path. We find another radio. It talks about how somebody's trying to how the somebodies are trying to tear each other apart. We move forward a bit and find the Molgrim's cave with a bunch of warning signs, which are pretty adorable. Around her, we notice that there's these like tiny little blue lights occasionally that are trying to guide us, which is interesting because I never noticed them before, so I don't know if this is the first time they pop up. But they're very helpful sometimes because you can just look and you'll see them, and if you start following them, they'll like give you guidance around certain areas, which is like an excellent way to do this, in my personal opinion. It kind of reminds me of Ghost of Tsushima's very thoughtful way of giving us guidance. Instead of like being like GPS turn on, follow this road, is like if you like meditated or whatever it was. It's been a while since I played that game. That the wind would blow in the direction that is like to the next quest you're looking for, which is excellent. And this is kind of like that. We don't activate it. It's just like every now and then you'll see these blue lights and you're like, oh, this is probably going to take me like in the direction I need to go. Following the light leads us to a room with 3 doors. And when we open one, the Molgrim comes out and eats up Pop Boy, and then runs away. We track it down and find it beating up Pop Boy, and then crying over another creature in this big room. Like it looks like another Molgrim, but it's dead. And there's like a cauldron in the middle. It's a pretty big, like cavernous room. So we open the door, which gets Molgrim's attention and causes her to like flee out of there. And then we follow up by. And then we follow over to the body and kind of look at that for a little bit. And then we hear a noise, or we hear a voice say that tells us to return some tokens to the cauldron because that'll free the Molgrim or something. And then the Molgrim comes back out, so it comes back in, so we got to hide. We then find the first one of these like tokens. It's possessed by a nobody who wants to get out of the swamp. So we literally just gotta pick her up and carry her out of the swamp. And then as soon as we get outside of like the Molgrim swamp, there's like a body just standing there. And then she's like, I always thought getting rid of bodies was a bad idea. I'm so happy to be here. I wish I could have a body again. And then the body, which feels bad for the head, like puts her on top of him. And then she gives us the heart token. Adorbs. And she admits to us that she stole it from the Mulgrim, and that she wanted to trade it to get a ticket out of this place. She then remember, oh yeah, we talked about that when we get the door. Okay. And that she says something about like, it gave us a sense of control, but it was still not the right decision, probably like in reference to like cutting their heads off or separating the heads from the bodies. And then we talk to the head, or we talk to the body, and that reveals that the heads betrayed the bodies, but the bodies betrayed them first. Oh, what could that mean? Something about burning the Mulgrims with fire and such, and how the fire needs to be returned to the Mulgrims, which is to relight the cauldron, clearly. So the next step is we got to head up to speak with like Mooncrow or some Moonraven. I think it's Mooncrow. So we take another flying machine. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention, the Potbelly got taken, he got beat up, and then left. And then we go and like, once the Mulgrim's out of there, the Potbelly is like, "Ooh, phew, thanks for rescuing me, buddy. Let's hang out." So we take the flying machine with Potbelly up to this like hill, and we walk around there, and eventually we meet this like very dark, creepy bird who starts talking to us. He wants to hear a story. So to hear the story, we have to light up murals in this area. And as we light up the murals in the correct order, we learn about how the Mulgrims lived in peace before the Somebodies invaded. And they took their fire. And then a war, once they took the fire from the Mulgrims started dying out. But then the Somebodies, who were like not satisfied, they started warring among themselves. And to stop the warring, they finally beheaded themselves. And that stopped the war because I guess without the bodies liked war or whatever. And then they exiled all the bodies away. But because the bodies weren't there to protect the heads, the last Mulgrim, who was, they thought I'd kill all the Mulgrim, but the last Mulgrim, who's the lady we've been like working with, she saw an opportunity, and so she returned. And then the Moonbird, or Mooncrow, or whatever, is like, ooh, hoo, 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 that story's so interesting, isn't it? And then he gives us a shard. And it's like, thanks, buddy, I guess. So the last shard is in this room. So there's a bunch of ragdolls like around, and then we have to find the masks that go on the ragdolls. And then every time we do, they do like a fun little dance, and which summons some of the darkness, which is kind of scary. But the darkness spits out like the last shard or the last token that we need to take back to the cauldron. So once we go back to the cauldron, we have Potboy light it up 3 times after we put all the tokens in there. And this brings the Mulgrim back, not the dead one, the one who's alive. And it finally gives like a resting piece to the dead Mulgrim, who gets dissolved, putting it to rest for good. We then hear the narrator tell us that this Mulgrim never liked the other Mulgrims until she met him. Oh, it's a love story. Tragic. And that she would spend time with him talking about the stars and shit, and it's like super sad. So once we hear that story and the Mulgrim like mourns the loss of her true love and all that stuff, we head back to the Nobodies. They are super grateful that we took care of the Mulgrim and all that stuff. So they don't have to worry about it anymore. And then we have shown them that the brain is important, or they knew the brain was important, but we showed them that the brain without a heart is not as powerful, and that having a heart and brain is like the true journey along the way or something. And that maybe someday they'll be able to get their bodies back from exile and be able to be combined with their hearts and their brains together. She then gives us a key and then warns us of the darkness, just like the other guy did. And she mentions specifically that it's hungry. So we use the key to get past Nobody Village, and there we find the old hat guy again. We wake him up with fire again. He makes a lot of comments about not having a head and how they not have heads and stuff. And then we grab Housey and continue down the midnight walk. And we see a whole bunch of the bodies returning. So as we're walking away from like the Nobody Village, we see all the bodies they exiled. They're coming back. So maybe the Nobodies are going to get their bodies back, and there'll be Somebodies again. We also find a radio past all that point, and it's the Mulgrims talking about how the fire gives them access to the world beyond the clay or something, and how the Mulgrims are the caretakers of the world, and that to destroy them is to destroy yourself. Or somebody's talking about all this stuff. Further along the midnight walk, Potboy finds Broken Potboy, and he's pretty sad about it. I mean, they give him a pat on the head and some coal, so we press forward. We find our two-headed friend, the soothsayer, again. He talks about the sun and how it's disappearing and the rise of the paper moon. And apparently we were there, even if we don't remember anything about it. And because we are always reborn when the need arises. And when the Potboy needs assistance with the sun or in the fire and all that stuff. And then the soothsayer mentions a storm coming before they fade away again. At that point, it starts raining. And it's like, oh, hey, they guessed that. So it's time for us to get inside Housey and have like a little cozy time with our Potboy friend. This is the part where he carries us over to the next area. Once we get to the next area and the rain stops, We find another radio. It's a guy talking about having a flame, and that the flame was always hungry, so I kept feeding it. And then he started down the road, and it talks about how there's all these dangerous detours that the Midnight Road wants you to go on, and so you're trying to just walk down the Midnight Road, and then you go on these detours and stuff, and that eventually his flame faded, and then he says, maybe I wasn't meant to carry the flame. Interesting. So we carry forward. At some point it starts to snow, and we find this big cat statue with a bell that rings as we pass. And then we get some narration. It talks about a lost cat was frozen and found a cave to keep it warm. And inside the cave was a dark, and the dark invited her in. So of course we enter the cave, the same cave the cat entered in. It's super dark in here, no lie. We find a radio. It talks about how the creator and the darkness corrupted the creator into making the fire-eating crawlers, because the maker wouldn't give the darkness all the fire. At that point, so we find a really scary monster and run from it, eventually escaping by getting to a room, and then the back room like caves in, closing off the monster from getting to us. We push through this like freezing section. So in this section, what occurs is that if Pop Boy runs out while the wind's blowing, he'll like freeze up, and then we have to like relight him. And so we got to like command him to go from like barrier to barrier as we go along. This only happens a couple times in the game, which is fine. It's kind of annoying, but because it only happens like twice, I want to say, it's really not that big of a deal. So we push through that, and then we start the tale of Coal Haven. The narrator keeps telling us about this cat, how it hates the eyes of the dark. It meets an old crone who wants to hear its story. And once we're in Coal Haven, we're locked in. It's time to do this. We find a radio. It's about a girl it's a girl telling how she's thinking about how cold it is, something about how their father lives with her mother and how she feels like she's freezing to death and that she needs to find a way to get warm. We do some puzzle solving, and we find another radio with a crazy guy talking about burning a thief. Then we follow our little blue light friend to a guy who welcomes us to Coal Haven. He like steps out of a tomb, and he's like, I'm actually dead. Or something. He talks about how the thief, this whole thing is centered around this thief, which is obviously the little girl from the radio at the very beginning. So the thief stole the fire, and because she stole the fire, it killed everyone. So we have to grab the bones of the dead thief that they burned at the stake or whatever, and return them to the grave of thieves so that we can unlock. There's like a giant furnace looking thing right in the middle of town, and it's got these like ghostly chains all around it. So every time we bring a bone back, it unleashes more of that, and then allows us to like continue on with our search. And throughout this level, the Coal Haven level, occasionally, it doesn't happen very often, but occasionally like a ghost will show up and like chase after us. And to get rid of the ghost, we have to close our eyes right at it. And that comes up pretty often. So the closing eyes thing, so every now and then we'll see like a blue lit eye, and if we close our eyes and stare at it with our eyes closed, it'll like disappear. So same thing for the ghost, and some other bad guys will like stop or transform or do other things as well if that happens. All right. So there's a bone sitting right by the Tomb of the Thieves. So we pick that one up and throw it in, and that gives us like, it's very good at doing like a tutorial, because it's like, okay, this is what we gotta do. We gotta find these bones, throw them in here, and then this thing will happen. That's excellent. Super excellent. So time to go look. So we followed the little light friend around as we hear the narrator talk more about the cat. The cat did not like the crone. Her hands were rough. And at some point, he like meowed at the crone, and then she pulled a knife on it. And the cat's like, I'm the fuck out of here. Like I mentioned, as we're moving around trying to find this other bone, we find a ghost, and we have to close our eyes to destroy it. We use a lot of our like listening powers here too to like find the bones as we wander around. So we have to close our eyes and just listen for where it's going, and then eventually we find the next bone, we bring it back, and then the guy there tells us about the thief. They said the thief started getting cold, and so started stealing all the matches. Like, it'd be one thing if they just stole a couple matches, but since she stole all the matches, that caused problems, because in the village didn't have matches anymore, and they weren't able to like light the furnace, and so everyone like died of cold and whatnot. And then we get more narration about a cat. The cat wanted warmth, but also had to pay a price. And that she had bony hands reaching for her, which she did not like. And so she kept moving around and avoiding people. And eventually she wanted to steal the warmth. And so she met some creepy guys talking about a match thief. And then so we go back to us. We meet some creepy guys. So we head to like the next location, and as we're like ascending this hill, there's a bunch of like creepy guys talking about the match thief, how they hate them, how they want to burn the house down, how they want to destroy the thief, all this stuff. And then nearby we find a doll, and we give it a mask, and she tells us about a creature in the woods, so that has a key to the house. So then the village burned her house down. So this is the mother, right? And so her house got burnt down. So we kind of by giving her the mask, we like revitalize her. And then she sends us to fight this monster, get the key. And then after the house burned down, after the village burned the house down, the villagers burned everyone inside the house down. So then we head into the woods and we find the key, and it's surrounded by all these like sleeping crawlers. And so once we grab it, we gotta like escape from all that crazy madness. And then we find the mother with her mask standing in front of the home. And we go up and we open the door, and there's like this scary body with the bone in there. And so we hit that, and then she's like weeping outside or whatnot. There's also a radio. The radio is a girl telling her mother and father that the villagers are coming. Then they ask her about the match she's carrying, and it's like, ruh-roh. On the way back to the grave, all the creepers that were like on the way here are just like disappeared out of here, so the whole thing's like very creepy. And then we hear more narration about the cat, how the cat found a girl, and the girl had a little match. And then she's like, hey, don't I have a pretty star? Back at the gravestone, the guy mentions that when the fire died, their hearts grew cold. And because the fire died and their hearts grew cold, that led them to like kill like a child, essentially, right? It's like where we're slowly starting to learn. So the whole village turned against like this family and like murdered a child because, I mean, she didn't know what she was doing. She was just cold. He then mentions this old man who stuck around and that he feels the worst because, bad about what? Oh, and he feels the worst, and that he has a lot of the same qualms that this graveyard guy has. Like, so he's not like, yeah, we killed that thief, she deserved it. He's like, man, we probably should not have done that. I feel really bad that we did that. That was not the right thing to do. We were just our hearts were so cold because of the lack of warmth and whatnot. As we head to the old man, we find more creeps. Some of them are like, fuck that thief, and then others of them are like, oh, I feel so bad, we shouldn't have done it. They're all pretty sad. A lot of them are pretty sad about it. Then we find a radio of a girl just like humming, and then we keep moving on and we find the old man humming the same song. So it's like, oh, the little thief girl like taught the old man a song, and he wishes he could hear her sing again. It was so beautiful, and he recorded her singing but dropped the recording in the woods. So he wants us to go get it. So we head down there, and we see this like creepy woman that like it's like totally bizarre. Like this is like this large creepy woman complaining about a singing head, and that we never see her again. She has nothing to do with anything. So we head that direction, and then we teleport into a cavern with some ghosts and a bell and the key. And so we have to chase down the key. So there's a little bell with like a key, and so we have to chase it around, and then there's like ghosts that pop up. So we gotta like close our eyes against the ghosts to stop them. And then once we do that, we're able to open the locked door and get the head. And so we take the head, which is the recording, back to the old man, and it plays this like adorable cutscene with like the sad melody, and it's like going over the whole level, and we see the mother crying, and the grave guy, and the cat statue, and then the old man, after the pretty song and all that, talks about his shame and how, you know, he has to live with his shame and the terrible things he did and not protecting the girl and whatnot. But he thanks us. We then hear that the girl offered the match from the narrator to the cat who let her have it. The cat let her have it, because she seemed like she needed it more. And with that, we got the skull, so we're able to go and break the final chain. As we do that, the grave man says something about them finally being able to die this time, because I guess they weren't dead for real. So then we head over to start the furnace up, and then while we're starting the furnace up, we hear the girl telling us to take the bell's key, which had appeared by her grave. And then finally we light the furnace up, and then we head back to the grave, and then there's like the ghost that's been haunting us this whole time. And we take like the cloak off, and once we take the cloak off, it's the thief girl. And so she was underneath, she was the ghost the whole time. And she asks if we can light her match one more time, and so we do, and then she fades away. We then hear like the meow, and then we turn around, and the big cat statue that was all the way back in the other thing is now in the center of town, right by the furnace. And hey, she made it here. She's purring really loudly and happily, and we get a little narration like, oh, the cat finally found the fire, and it was so happy, and all this stuff, and glad to be here and be warm. With that, we head out of Coal Haven, and we teleport back to where Housey is. Oh yeah, found the. Oh no. Okay, yeah. So there's a teleportation like cabinet right by Housey. So we use that to teleport out of there, and then we get the story about the cat found a large furnace, curled up next to it, and was happy and warm forever, eternally warm. Excuse me. Back on the midnight walk, we find the old soothsayer again. He says something about the moon again, and the mountain, and the final fire, and all that. And apparently, we've always been destined to burn, and then they leave. A nearby radio is a guy talking about a pointy hat guy that we keep running into, and some talk about the maker and how this guy's existed on other tables, and that he's existed before this table was set up or whatever. He's older than time itself, and that he might be the first creation from the creator. We then find old Hattie boy chilling right by Housey. He talks about how warm the air is from Coalhaven these days, and he brings up Moon Mountain as well as the soothsayer who brought it up earlier. He talks about how awesome Housey is, which is true, but also one of those things that's like, why are we talking about Housey all of a sudden? Like, what's going to happen? And then he says something about how we should get some rest. So we head inside, and we see an eye, and so we close our eyes on it, and then we get surrounded by the darkness with its creepy eyes. And then at that point, we're surrounded by flame. So we pop outside of Housey, and Pop Boy runs away from a giant hand, grabs Housey, and he runs away, and then a giant hand reaches down and grabs Housey and pulls him away. And it's like, okay, hat guy, you said you got our back. You said, I'm going to watch you guys. You go in Housey and take a little rest, and I'll watch you. And then the second we do, we have a nightmare about fire. Which is foreshadowing, obviously, and then old Housey boy gets picked up by some giant asshole and carried away, and it's like, Jesus. All right, well, down the midnight road, let's figure out where the fuck this thing's going to rescue Housey, shall we? So now we got these crawler boys. They get they get eyes on them now. So what do the eyes do? Because remember, when you have these like blue glowing eyes, we can close our eyes and it does stuff like dismiss the ghost or open doors or do all sorts of fun stuff. So now we got to utilize them on these crawler monsters to change them into statues to do some puzzles. And this part is actually very good. I really enjoyed it. And then we cruise through them, and then we head to the Craftsman Heart, which is the next level. And then we hear a story about how the boatman was out one day and he ran into another boat in the fog. He cursed the other person on the boat. And then when the fog cleared, there was no one there. We learned from a radio nearby after this strange introduction that I kind of feel has no point in being there, that the sarcophagi, which is the things that we resurrect from, that they're molds, and they're specifically for the burnt one. They're for us. And so they were set up so that we can continue to get molds just in case something crazy happens, like we eat up. Yum, yum, yum. It also says something about matches and the hollow homes and stuff. And then as we're trudging along, the Moonbird shows up. Yeah, that asshole. So he shows up by this like clock puzzle thing, and he says some creepy shit about a story not being worth it if there's no adversity. Which is fair. I agree. Anyway, so at that point, we meet the Watchers. Watchers are a new style of bad guy. They sit there quietly, and then when you get close, they start to shake and rumble a bunch, so you can run or you can go hide or whatever. They don't instantly attack, but when they do pop out, they run super fast, so you cannot run away from them. So you got to kind of move past them to like a hiding location or whatever, because once they're going, they're going. And then they like open up their little doors, and they go, "Rawr!" Fun. So we do the clock puzzle, and then we find this huge boy, the big boy, the clearly the craftsman, is his tail the craftsman, and he's holding Housey, that asshole. And then we see some like creepy flying guys around that don't really have anything to do with anything. I was like, oh, that's creepy. And so village or something. Oh, so we head past another Watcher, and this gets us to like the village square where we can actually like really get into like the story or whatever. There's a bunch of figures wandering around here with like star heads or whatever, and they're like, oh, I wish she loved us or some bullshit like that. And then the Moonbird shows up again, and he talks about the big guy, how he's the craftsman, and that he's like us. He's one of the first, and that is and that his heart has darkened. It's full of darkness, and that we need to go light it back up so that he can like move on with his life or whatever. And then he talks about how the Moonbird talks more about how he wants more story, and also that if we're able to help the craftsman, then somehow we'll be able to get out of the maze that we're trapped in. So we take a little teleportation wardrobe and enter into the craftsman. Awesome. So here we can light up his heart with warm fire, but first it's got chains, of course. So we got to like unchain that heart before Potboy can like supercharge this thing like he did the furnace at Coalhaven. So we unlock one of them because it's already like bursted open, and it's not like the chains this time. There's like, we light a little rope and it kind of like burns some stuff away, but we got to go through like cabinets to open up to kind of cut the rope so we can actually get access to it or whatnot. Not that this is just all like set dressing, right? It's not like we actually cut anything or do anything. What we do is we go into each wardrobe and we teleport around, and then we unlock like the rope cutting thing automatically happens, and we come back and light it a fire, and then we're gonna burn up his heart and light it real strong with Potboy. So in the next section, Moonbird warns us about getting shot, and yeah, there's this hombre just standing in the middle of this room with this big elephant gun, and we gotta like circle around him, and as long as we're covered by like something, we're good to go. So this whole little circle area is a puzzle for us to kind of like figure out how to like sneak around and get past this guy by like hitting certain things and sending Potboy to do certain things. Once we get to the end, we turn on an old movie, and I think there's 4 parts to this movie if I remember correctly, and the movie's called Craftsman's Heart. So this is part 1. And it shows the craftsman setting up and destroying things, and then he sets up the village that we're like currently in, and the movie mentions that it's hollow. It's like an old timey movie, like a, not a talkie, if you will. Like there's no talking. Like we have to read about this story. And then the gun guy, after we watch the video, he tells us that the craftsman is building without the love for his craft, and that's the problem because his heart is full of darkness and whatnot. And he tells us to end it so that our story can begin. So we go around and light projectors. As we move forward, the narrator mentions that there was a potter who got stuck in his open clay. We go past a whole batch of watchers to find the Craftsman Heart 2. The Craftsman's Heart 2, which is part 2 of the movie. So we learned that he was going to create his masterpiece, that it was a star-headed lady puppet, his daughter, and his son. So he gives her life and orders her, not in order, but orders her, like a command, her to rule the city. And then some of the puppets watching the movie are jealous of her and talk some shit. We go past some more puzzles, and then we get to part 3 of the Craftsman Heart. And there we learn that the son did not wish to rule, that she wanted to dance. We get a cute little dancing scene. And then the craftsman finds her dancing, and he's super upset. He's like shaking and it's all very good. And he says, "You are made to rule." And the people watching continue to badmouth her and stuff. Around this point, the Moonbird shows back up. He mocks them for being weak imitations and for not living up to like the thing either, or just being assholes. And then the narrator talks about how the Weaver went to search for her son because she thought she lost him in the dark. And then one day the son returns, but she thinks it's a spirit. So when he's knocking on the door to get inside, she doesn't open it. And so he leaves and he never returns. And it's okay. So I'm trying to like piece together in my head, right? So we got the boatman with his boat curses and the fog. And then we got the guy returning from the thing. And then what was the other one we had? We had some sort of like, the potter. The potter got stuck in his open clay, and I'm like, I think this is all like people trying to, like people being mad at something that's like not there or whatever, or like, you know, they need to like, I don't know. I was never able to like fully grasp like what these stories all have in common, because the Craftsman story is obviously, and we'll get to part 4 in a second, is that he created this woman to be his daughter and his son to rule, and she didn't want to do that, and so they came to like hate each other essentially, or like they came to like non-agreeance, and so then he lost her. And so, but that's not really what the mother did. She just like was scared. So I guess maybe it's about being scared. Like the boatman cursed somebody who wasn't there, but it's like, what did he hit? I don't know, and stuff like that. Anyway. So then at this point we travel down this like gross cavern of like flesh-y stuff, and then Potboy disappears down a hole. Oh no. So now we're all left alone and whatnot. And so we move around a little bit more, and eventually we find a radio that talks about a guy sitting in a wardrobe hiding, and how he doesn't want to go out because the watchers are out there, and as long as he stays there, he'll be safe. We solved this shadow puzzle, which is pretty good, and we're trying to like put one shadow of the craftsman on one wall, and so we have like an object in the middle, and there's light shining on it on 2 different sides of it, and so we got to move it around so that the craftsman's like on one wall, and then the daughter is on like the other wall. So that was a pretty fun puzzle, I'm not gonna lie. And then once we do that, Pop Boy shows up, and it's like, "What's up, homie?" And that allows us to get into a flying machine and get out of this like pit that we found ourselves into, and takes us to the last projector, which is part 4 of the Craftsman Heart. And we see him being super upset with his daughter and like shaking and being mad. And then she gets bad back and she destroys the crown that he gave her, and then she leaves. And this leaves him in the dark. Okay, that's how he ended up there. And that caused him to retreat back to his like hollow creations and like creating things without his heart, and his heart is darkened and all that stuff. Which ends it. And then it's like the end of the story. And then the Moonbird shows up to summarize the whole thing. Okay. In case we missed it, which we literally just watched the whole thing. So, okay. And then, so he literally sums it up. There's nothing to talk about. The guy came to a town. He created a daughter. She rejected him because she wanted to dance. And then she like stormed off. All right, there you go. There's the summation he gives. And then he's like, "Oh, that was a good story. Bye." And we're like, okay. So then we continue our walk. So then this leads us back to the Craftsman Heart, like not the movie, but the actual Craftsman Heart. And this unlocks this like all as we're going through. Like I said, we keep like unlocking parts of like the Craftsman Heart, and so now it's just floating free. And so at this point, we can get Pop Boy under there, and he fires it up like real fucking good, just like as I mentioned before, the Coalhaven furnace. And once his heart is like fully lit and on fire, we magically teleport back to the square. He puts us down back in the square, and then the Craftsman finally sees all of his creations and how sad they are, and then he gives us Housey back because he was being an asshole holding on to Housey. I still don't know what his point with that was, but we hop back in house, and he like wanders back over to the Midnight Walk as the Craftsman decides he's gonna, I don't know, use his heart to make creations, and then he's gonna go along with his new creations instead of just letting them be like wallow in their own sadness because he's not paying attention to them. Once we're back on the Midnight Walk, the narrator tells us, this is another story, obviously it's another story, about someone asking the Craftsman how he makes such perfect things. And then the Craftsman responds that he just gets some wood and then he feels it out. Good. Excellent. So then a nearby radio on the Midnight Walk tells of a man who wrote a letter to the monster in the woods. That his sister told him that he was just writing her the whole time because he'd be getting letters back from the monster or whatever. And then he knows she's just playing a joke on him. Oh no, she says she was playing a joke on him and there's no monster. But deep inside, the man knows that there is a monster out there and that he continues to send the monster letters every single day. And this leads us into this penultimate level, or the second to last level, which is the Tale of the Dark. And Twinhead is here again, and he talks about how the flame wishes to be free and that the way of fire, that we must release the flame at the summit of Moon Mountain. And then we follow Pop Boy. Well, he lights up a whole, he starts getting like super excited to like light up all these candles in here, and he's just running around lighting candles. And then Housey's there, and he runs over and sets Housey on fire. What the fuck? Why, Pop Boy? Why did you set poor Housey on fire? And Housey burns to fucking ash. Damn. And then Pop Boy, he continues on his like frantic rampage or whatever, and he eventually gets to this cliff over this big pile of darkness in the ground, and then he like screams out, and then he cries out as much as he can, and then his like fire goes out, and then half his head falls off down into the darkness. What the fuck? Like, what happened? So then we head down this little ramp to get to the darkness. And then we see like all around this area is just tons of watchers just like watching us, not from inside the game, but obviously from like the background. So it's all very like, ooh, what's going on here? And then we head over to the darkness, and then the darkness's eyes appears, and then it like looks at us for a little bit and then tosses out the part of the Pop Boy's head that fell into him. So we go back up there, we like reattach Pop Boy's head and light him up, and he comes back to life, and then he like runs onward. So then we follow him, and we meet Pointy Hat Fellow again, and then Pop Boy lights up his fire and then runs away. Then we stay for a little bit and chat with the guy while Pop Boy is still being like manic, and he tells us that we have to walk on, and we have to walk on alone, that no one else can follow him. And just like the others, we'll have to make a choice, but that we should follow our heart and make the right choice in that regard. And then something about getting in the way of a flame and its destination could cause problems or something. And then he warns us to catch up with Pop Boy before the dark does. And it's like, man, darkness just saved Pop Boy. What are you talking about? We then enter this like very deserted looking place with large ships everywhere. And we meet the guy who was like sending the letters to the monster, and he repeats the same story as he did before, and then tells us about Housey, and he mentions that he is a Merkel. I actually think this is supposed to be a woman, to be honest, because at some point there's like the only time we've ever heard Merkel before is I picked up like a doll or something that was like anti-Merkel. So I thought this was a dude, but it might be anti-Merkel. I don't know. I don't know if what's going on with that. So we're just gonna keep calling him a dude. Anyway, he mentions that that the pot boy is actually my home. And then he mentions that the sun's missing, and we talk about the stars a little bit, and he talks about how the people yearn for the light, in the end of the night, and that a lot of these people, because they yearn for like the sun to rise again and for the world to like open up and then just to stop being dark, but they're looking in like all the wrong places, right? And he's kind of referencing all the different stories, like the nobodies and the people in the village who like killed the little thief girl and the craftsman, how instead of like trying to get the sun started and go back to like the natural order of things, it seems that they're doing all these like shady like artificial things that are just causing them more problems in the long run, and they aren't really solving anything. So us as the burnt one, like it's really our task, our burden to bear, if you will, to go and light this thing back up so that we can help them all like find the light again and be able to live their lives instead of being like crazy or something. And then he also talks about how the midnight walk, it takes you places. And it tells the tales, right? But it never mentions itself. Like we go along the midnight walk, we learn about like the craftsmen and the nobodies and the somebodies, and we learn about the like all this shit. But at no point do we actually learn anything about the midnight walk. At that point, we're gonna follow Pot Boy away, and then something comes up and nabs him. And then leaves us in a dark room. We then hear a voice start talking about the dark. What is it? The darkness could be a friend. And then we see some images. We see images about all the various stories we played through, and how the darkness to some people is many things to many people, right? That it could be bad, it could be bad. Parts of the darkness have like helped people learn things or grow, but also part of the darkness seems to take things away and make people sad hippopotamus or whatnot. And so like, is it truly noble? I guess the game is trying to convince me to like, hey, you shouldn't just like light the fucking fire, because clearly there's two endings to this juncture, right? So it's not always the right choice to light the fire and bring the sun back. Like that maybe the darkness is necessary too, and that maybe being in the darkness is not necessarily wholly a bad thing. And I wholeheartedly disagree based on like what the game's taught me at this point about this place, that like, no, the absolute right choice is to like light the fire back up. Like I don't know what you're trying to, all at last minute here, you have this whole thing and I'm learning all this stuff, and like what I'm inferring from this, and maybe I'm just an idiot because I am, is that the people need the light because they start doing crazy shit when they like don't have the light, to like find light and find warmth and stuff. So if we can just like allow them to have a normal day-night cycle, or like have the sun again, then maybe things will not be so crazy. But then again, I mean, the light was stolen or turned off or whatever at some point because people got, I don't know, maybe they got tired of the sun. Who knows, right? So anyway, we eventually find Pot Boy, and again we need to relight him because somehow we wandered off and lost the light again. And then we follow him, and this takes us up to Moon Mountain. And again, the soothsayer there, the two-headed guy, and he talks about how the fire is dwindling, but a spark is all you really need to ignite the final fireplace. And then asks us if we're going to do the right thing, if we're going to save the world, or are we going to disappear in ignominy and burn, right? So they, or burn, I don't know. Anyway, so they disappear. We go and we destroy some monsters, and we find a radio. It's a lady talking about how the two-legged being's trying to catch the sun, but the maker put the sun so far, far, far away. So they started collecting matches instead, and the matches were like mini suns. And then one day they ran out of matches, right? At that point, we find another flying machine, and we light it up and head up to Moon Mountain. We destroy some more Watchers, and then we see like a whole fucking lot of like broken pot boys everywhere. Since we're at the top of the mountain, now we got to fight some more frozen wind. I told you it'd come back. So this is the second and final part where we have to deal with the frozen wind. I think there's two parts of this, if I remember correctly. And then again, just a lot more pot boys, like piles and fucking piles of them. It's kind of like Clair Obscura, where you just find dead people like all over the place, like the prior expeditions. It's like that. It's almost become like, this is like a short section, but at some point I just ignore. I'm like, wow, there's a lot of pot boys here, and then you just keep moving. You're like, God, there's a lot of pot boys here, and at some point you just like zone out of it because it's like it's too much. We find another radio. It's a guy. He talks about how he wasted it. He didn't know what he had, but that he'd probably waste it again and give him a chance. It seems like he came up here with a pot boy to like relight the sun, but then like he had like the warmth and he just like kept it or something. We then find another flying machine so we can fly up even further. Oh yeah, here we go. There's a third freezing wind section. So we get a whole nother like epic freezing wind section. And then at the very top, we enter the moon. And right as we see there, we're like in the moon at the top of the mountain, Pop Boy and me, and then Housey shows up. And then we, Pop Boy hops on Housey, because at first Pop Boy tries to light the moon, but he's too low, and then Housey runs in, and then Pop Boy hops up on top of, and just like with the Craftsman Heart and with the furnace and the cauldron and everything, with the nobodies and somebodies and such, he's able to reach the sun inside and light it. So then we burn, and then of course we get the ending choice. So it's like, do you want to keep burning or do you want to stop? And I'm like, hell no, burn this shit up. Let's do this. This is what I was made. And then we get a spark that explodes out of Pop Boy and lights up the sun, and it brings morning, and it destroys all the monsters, and of course it kills Housey, Pop Boy, and I, because we're caught right in the middle of it. And we get some scenes of all the reactions of all the people, like all the monsters and the watchers, and all the shady shit goes away. And then we get to see like the craftsman, and we see the daughter like walking off in the distance, and we see the somebody's nobody's like coming together, and we see like the girl like with no more match because now she's warm as a ghost or whatever, and everyone's like happy and being put to rest and whatnot. And then we get like this ending thing, and actually my game like crashed, and I tried running this like 2 or 3 times, and it always crashed like right before like the very end of the ending, so I had to look it up. But then like I guess the hat guy makes some commentary about how you I had to write it down. He just makes some asinine commentary for what I saw in the online video, but something about like the sun and the warmth, or it's whatever happens, and like life continues no matter what, or something. And it's like cool, and then the credits roll, and that's Midnight Walk. So what happens if you choose not to light it? Well, from the video I watched of someone else getting that ending, and then reading somebody talking about it, it seems like it's literally the exact same thing. It's just like the Merkel, instead of being like, ooh, the sun, very good, she like looks up at the stars, or he looks up at the stars, whatever the fuck it is. And the same thing, everyone kind of roughly does the same thing. The monsters don't disappear. And then which again, I don't know how you count that as like a different ending without being like moral judgment on this. Like clearly one's the bad ending and one's the good ending. Like I like how games these days always there's the good ending, and then there's the other good ending, and it's like I played Third Skirt did the same fucking thing. And if you saw my video on that, it's like 4 hours, so I don't know if you did. But it's like, no, there's the good ending, which makes sense, and like where people like accept reality and like deal with the trauma and move on with their lives. And then there's the bad ending, where they live in a fantasy and never actually get better, and actually like torture this whole other civilization of people, right? Instead of just allowing them to like end their world in like a normal, healthy way and whatnot. So whatever. This is the same thing. It's like, oh hey, the ending where you like get rid of all the monsters and you helped everybody out, and everybody gets to feel the warmth just like they always wanted, and they all get to like move on with their lives and do things and be happy. Or you get the ending where they just like accept their fucking fate, and there's still monsters roaming the land, and there's no advancement and stuff, but they're both good endings. And I'm like, shut the fuck up, game. Anyway, that's Midnight Walk. I liked it. Fitgirl was right. She put her little like pink paw on there on her website of like her special games that she thinks are great, and I would have to agree. This game was pretty fucking good. Now, is it a horror game? No. Is that ruining my October? Well, surprise, surprise, my whole October is probably gonna get ruined. Because then it just choose like straight up like fucking scary games. But I tried. I chose games that all said they were horror, and like, okay, we'll see how that pans out. Spoiler alert, not great. But no, I enjoyed it, and it does have some like horror elements, I guess, if you really want to stretch your imagination. But that's irrelevant. What's relevant is that this is a great game, but you should definitely play it if you like good stories and fun little romps, and you don't mind that it's like it's like like adventure games. Like again, it's like real close to just being like one of those walking simulator games, which I still like because sometimes they have really good stories and stuff. Like I really liked the Rapture one. I can't remember what that was, and then Welcome Home was pretty good too, but it was more of like an exploration game, right? I don't think I've ever played, like, to me a walking simulator is it's almost like the Walking Dead game that came out, that was like the first one that was pretty good, by that company that just like you just like watch a movie, and then occasionally you get to make like one choice, and your choice doesn't really fucking matter, like it just changes the story, right? It's like watching Bandersnatch or whatever that fucking thing was on Netflix. But no, there's a lot of gameplay here, and it's like puzzles to solve and other things to do. So I would say it's straight up just like a first person adventure game with like some very light horror motifs. Just like a sprinkling or a whiff of some of that horror goodness. So there you go. So definitely recommend. Next week, we're going to cover the Illusion games, which are made by Ravens Games. And They're supposed to be puzzle horror games, and I guess we'll find out if they're horror at all. Oh, Lord. Next year I'll be better, I promise. Anyway, go ahead and like, share, subscribe, comment, and I will catch you guys later. Bye.